Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Chicken People podcast. Today, we're talking about a product that is both widely used and praised as a natural pest deterrent in the chicken yard, and often criticized as something that may be extremely dangerous to your flock. And that is diatomaceous earth. If you've ever gone online to search out options for getting rid of mites or lice or maybe preventing worms, then you've probably seen this product either suggested as a must-have or read that it's something you should avoid at all cost. I know, that's real helpful, right? Well, I can't tell you that I have the answer to this debate, or can even give you a clear answer on which side is right, because they kind of both are. But I can tell you what I've learned about it by doing quite a bit of research and listening to people whose opinion on this I trust and value. So to kick things off, we're going to go over exactly what this stuff is. And the first thing to know when considering whether or not you're going to use DE is that there are two types. There's food-grade diatomaceous earth, which is the type that you would buy for using in your chicken yard, maybe your garden, wherever it is you're trying to get rid of pests. Now, this stuff is made of fossilized remains of diatoms, which are microscopic algae-like organisms that lived in ancient bodies of water and left behind these silica-rich skeletons when they died. Over time, these skeletons fossilized into the rock that we now know as diatomaceous earth. Food-grade DE is actually used in a lot of things that we use every day, like toothpaste, skincare products. It's even in a lot of the food and drinks that we use all the time. And it's generally safe to use when applied properly, but it is something you want to avoid breathing in, as it can be harmful to the respiratory system. The other type is industrial-grade DE. This is often used in filtration systems for pools, things like that, and is actually made from processed saltwater diatoms that look like these little glass snowflakes under a microscope. These diatoms also contain a high amount of silica. This is what gives DE its abrasive texture that causes the cuts to exoskeletons of insects, eventually leading to dehydration and ultimately their death. Now, food-grade DE also contains this silica, but is to have less than 1% total to get the food-grade label. Okay, now let's talk about the benefits of using diatomaceous earth in chicken coops. One of the main draws of DE is its effectiveness against common poultry pests like mites, lice, and fleas. And when it's applied correctly, DE provides a natural, chemical-free solution to managing these critters and helping to keep your flock healthy and comfortable. When things like mites come into contact with it, maybe they crawl through some that you dusted a nesting box with, the DE actually sticks to their body and starts cutting them up pretty bad. This product also tends to dry things out, so these open cuts caused by the jagged silica now allow the DE to start drying them out to the point of their death. Another feature that makes DE attractive is that it's organic in nature, making it an appealing option for people seeking a more environmentally friendly and chemical-free pest control method. So, how do we actually use diatomaceous earth in our chicken coops? Well, the methods vary, but commonly, chicken keepers will dust their coop bedding, nesting boxes, mix it into dust baths. Some people will even dust their chickens directly with it or put it into their food. But the same thing about DE that kills those parasites are also a potential hazard to us and our chickens. And this makes it very important for us to be cautious with where we put it and how we get it there. DE out of the bag is this really fine powder. I'd compare it to flour as far as how it looks and feels. And this can make it really easy to get airborne and then breathed in if you're not being careful. And look, this is probably a good time to mention that I'm not a doctor. I'm not a vet, and I'm not qualified to tell anyone how or if they should be handling potentially hazardous materials. I'm just going off of what I've read and what I've talked with other chicken keepers about, as well as what I do myself. But I would definitely recommend that if you decide to or are already using DE, put in some time to do your own research on it if you haven't already. Anyways, I can safely say this is not something you want to be breathing in, and it's just as important to know the risks that come along with using DE as it is to know the benefits. So let's turn our attention to those potential risks associated with diatomaceous earth, and specifically the risks to our chickens. While DE is generally regarded as safe when used correctly, there are a few things you should keep in mind. First, the abrasive nature of this stuff can cause irritation to the really delicate respiratory systems of chickens, especially if they inhale a lot of it. So while you're out there spreading it or mixing it up, it is important that you use a really good quality and well-fit dust mask. Now, your chickens, on the other hand, won't be able to filter the air they breathe, so I do everything I can to keep that stuff out of the air and apply it directly where I want it used. Another caution: while food-grade DE is considered safe for chickens to ingest in small amounts, overconsumption can lead to some intestinal irritations, even blockages, so care should be taken, and you really want to monitor your flock to prevent any excessive ingestion of it. As far as mixing it into their feed goes, this is not something that I do, but most of the recipes that I saw called for anywhere between 1 and 3 cups of DE to a 50-pound bag of feed. So it's a pretty light mix, but most of the studies on this, at least the ones that I saw, say that DE really isn't all that effective after it gets wet, and I'm pretty sure that anything a chicken eats eventually does get wet once it hits that digestive tract. So it just didn't make sense to me to use it there and create a situation where I'm trying to mix up this fine powder with the feed and probably end up breathing a bunch of it in or getting it on my clothes and tracking it back into the house. So personally, I choose not to use it in the feed. Now, beyond the immediate risks that we covered, mostly all associated with respiratory problems, there's some concerns regarding the long-term efficiency of DE in pest control. While it's effective with pest management initially, there can actually be a tolerance or a resistance that builds up to it over time, which could render it less potent. Now, I'll get more into exactly how I've been using it in a bit, but this fact highlights the importance of having a comprehensive pest control strategy that includes several approaches to taking care of these type of critters. And ideally, it's all based on preventing an infestation in the first place by keeping your chicken space as clean as you can. I wanted to go through some of the risks associated with DE first, because when you're considering whether to incorporate diatomaceous earth into your chicken care routine or not, it's really important to weigh the potential benefits against the risks. And think about what the risks are to other chemical-based options like, say, Elector PSP. Now, that's a product that has certainly been proven to work, and it's really popular amongst chicken keepers. But there's risks with that as well, including damage to the liver, kidneys, even bone marrow. I realize that PSP has been deemed safe to use by the EPA, but a government agency's approval of a chemical that's safe to use in or on food doesn't exactly fill me with confidence that it's actually safe. You can see Red 40 or Twinkies for an example of that. So in my opinion, talking with poultry experts, other chicken keepers who have used these products, and hearing about those experiences, good and bad, or even asking your vet about the pros and cons are a really good way to get some insight on these products and help you make a decision that feels right for you and your flock. You also want to keep in mind that monitoring your chicken's health and your pest situation can really help to gauge the effectiveness of DE and the other products that you might use over time. Okay, I wanted to do a quick run through of some of the products that I'm using currently. DE is one of the products that I use for helping keep pests down, but it's not the only one. You've probably heard me or other chicken keepers mention the use of lime or barn lime, or seen some of the many ads for First Saturday lime. Now, I still haven't tried the First Saturday product, although I have heard people talk about having really good results with it. Personally, I can't get past the price tag on it. It's about $30 for a 20-pound bag, where barn lime, which is slightly different and can't make the claim to continue working even after it gets wet, is about $4 for the same 20-pound bag. They both work in similar ways, the claim being that barn lime is a little less pure than the First Saturday and doesn't do quite as well repelling the pests. And that may be true, but barn lime definitely does work. And for a while, this was the only thing I was using and still having really good results. But a few months ago, I started looking more into DE and the benefits of using that, and have since started using a mix of both. And the recipe for that mixture is very precise. I take a big cup and fill it with barn lime, pour that into a small bucket. Then I take that same cup and scoop out a little bit of DE, usually about a quarter of the amount of the lime that I used, and mix it up. That's pretty much it. Oh, and I do use some kind of breathing protection, or at least I mean to. Sometimes that's just my t-shirt pulled up over my nose, combined with holding my breath and then running out of the barn right after I mix it. But in all seriousness, you really should use some kind of device to protect yourself from breathing this stuff in because you do not want to get it into your lungs or in your throat. After that, I take that bucket into the chicken run with me, along with the rake, shovel, whatever bedding I'm using that time of year, and a wheelbarrow, so I've got everything I need to go and get things cleaned up. And I don't necessarily apply this mix after every single cleaning, which I typically do once a week. In fact, that's probably where you can find me just about any Saturday morning. That's when I make my rounds, cleaning out all the coops and the stalls. And all my chickens know that after I do get done cleaning up and putting some new bedding down, that they're going to get some treats. So I like to have everything in there with me so I can go in one time, get it all cleaned up, and then leave them very happy as I move on to the next one. But after I get all that litter picked up from the run and get the sand cleaned up in the coop, this is also when I clean out the nesting boxes and make sure that they're all in good shape. But before putting down the new bedding, I take that bucket of mixed up lime and DE and I just sprinkle it around wherever I think it needs to go. I always hit the nesting boxes with just a really light dusting under the bedding, usually hit the roosting bars after running a scraper across them. I just put a little bit of that powder mix in my hand while I'm wearing those rubber palmed gloves, and then just run it across the board or the tree branches in some cases, just enough so it kind of gets in there, but most of it falls to the ground. I don't want little piles of it that'll eventually get kicked around and then possibly be in the air when they're in there sleeping. I also sprinkle a good amount of it into the sand in their coop. I always try to pour it from down really low so that it's not getting blown around through the coop, and then I'll mix that into the sand with the same rake that I had in there to clean it. Continue to sprinkle it all over the run. Usually I go a little bit heavier in spots where I know there was a lot of poop or around the feeder and the water buckets, and then very heavy in any crevices or tight spots that don't really get turned over as much. Then I try to get all those shavings or wood chunks, whatever it is I'm putting on the ground, spread out really quickly so that it all gets mixed up and hopefully none of that DE gets kicked back up into the air. And I actually do the same thing in my goat and sheep stalls when I clean those too. The lime really does help repel the same type of parasites that the DE attacks, and it helps to dry things up. This time of year when it's raining on and off through the week, I may change it up a little bit. I'm not going to go and dump this stuff out if I know it's going to rain that day or if it just poured. I know First Saturday says their product works even after getting wet, where the barn lime and the DE can't make that claim. So I just try to put it down at a time that I know it'll have a chance to work before getting totally soaked. And if I need to do an off-schedule dusting because of the weather, I don't really mind burning through an extra bag here or there because it's so cheap. In fact, I'll occasionally dust the floor of the entire barn with it, focusing on the corners, up against the walls, anywhere we store feed, spots where moisture might build up. Even if I'm not worried about the parasites in those places, I do like how well the lime will dry things out, which can also help reduce the chance of mold developing. And so far, it's been working great. I haven't seen any creepy crawlers on my chickens, which I check for regularly. Don't seem to have any external parasite issues with the goats, so I think I'm going to stick with this routine as long as it keeps on working. And if I do get an outbreak, I'd like to try to use a more natural remedy before going for the harsher stuff. And that may even be the time that I would try applying DE directly to the chicken if I see that it's suffering from a really bad infestation. If it does come to this, I would try one of the applicator tools for it that are available. These actually allow you to apply the DE right up close to the skin so that you don't accidentally dust your chicken's face. And this would be one of those situations where, even knowing that there's some risk in this, you just have to weigh the risk of the worst case using the DE versus the worst case of not using it, or using other harsher chemicals. And it can be a tough call, one that we'll all have to make for ourselves based on what risks we feel more comfortable with. At the end of the day, what matters is that you know the options you have and you choose what's best for you and keeping your chickens happy and healthy. Guys, that's it for today's episode. I hope that you've gained some insights into the use of diatomaceous earth in chicken keeping and feel confident that you can make an informed decision for your flock. As always, if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, don't hesitate to reach out. You guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.